Okay, so we are going to have our very first Bible study session tonight. I think that doing the YouTube videos is probably going to be the best way to do it for now, because it still creates a visual of you seeing me, and then when you see the video, you'll also be able to still comment, ask questions back and forth. I'm going to try to be as active as possible down in the comment section if there is any questions. There are a couple of young ladies that are in a group chat with me, and we have been discussing, we've been excited about having this Bible study group, about starting this Bible study group. With that being said, I posed a question a few days ago to them. What are some things or some topics that you would like to learn about? And somebody said it's not necessarily something in the Bible that I want to learn about, but I want to learn about the Bible, like history, Bible history, biblical history. And so for me, those who have heard me teach on it before, you know that I'm very thorough, and that is something that I take a lot of intentionality in studying. I love the history of the Bible, and I also look at the Bible as a history book, also not just as a spiritual guide, but it's also a history book as well. So with that being said, our very first session today, we're going to go back in time and kind of discuss some of the biblical history that's not always publicized or not always talked about. We're going to just kind of scratch the surface a little bit, enough of a basis that we're then the next session that we have will actually be a Bible study session where we'll actually talk a topic out of the Bible. But for now, what we're going to do is focus on just some of the historical facts about the Bible and the form that we have it in today. I actually preached a message on this in particular. I preached a message on this topic probably about 6 or 7 months ago, last summer, 2023, sometime in that summer. And the way I preached that message is I started out and I said, look at what we have come today, right? Today we have so many options of how to study the word, how to obtain the word, right? And so with that being said, we have it on our phone, we have it on our devices, on our tablets, and so on and so forth, right? And so it's at our fingertips. It's fully disposed to us, you know what I'm saying? But we're in a time where even though we have the access, we choose to study or not, right? But you would think that we would study more because of the accessibility that we have to the Word of God, right? So I want us to travel back and let's think about years and years ago, generations and generations ago, what was going on and how were people recording the word. First off, how were they passing the word down? Because for it to make it to us, the word was passed down, right? It was passed down generation to generation, and so on and so forth. And so there were many different traditions that went on to make sure that the word prevailed and it was preserved over time. And so that was what how I started a message when I initially preached it. I think it is recorded somewhere out there. I think it is somewhere on YouTube, but it's not on this channel. So for a basis of those who will be following the channel and keeping up with some of the studies, we'll start with this today. So let's go back. First off, we have to think about the fact that we have it in the way that we have the word now. But remember, we before that we had a tradition, oral tradition. What people before people were reading and writing, there was an oral tradition. So a lot of what went on in the Bible and a lot of what they knew and what they believed was passed down orally from generation to generation. And you will hear in movies that are, historical movies where they talk about historical events, you will sometimes see that there would be an older person in each village that knew a lot of the oral tradition of the that particular tribe or that particular set of people. That was a big thing during that time, where you would have people orally passing down from generation to generation. You would have people passing down the word through oral tradition. So that is one of the main ways that the word persevered during that time period, years and years ago, generations ago. Another thing that we have to be mindful of is, after that, people were trying to record the word, right? And when you get into recording the word, because I think we always think about the Bible, and I wish I had one near me. It's on the other side of the table. But we think about the fact that we have it on devices now, and we think about our grandmama carried the Bible, or our mother carried the Bible. And we have to realize, okay, it went from oral tradition to people wanting to record it some way, somehow. So the first thing people was writing on was inside of caves. We don't think about that, because we've not had to live in a cave before. So we don't think about the fact that people lived in caves. Caves were a cool area. It was shelter. So a lot of people's, some of the first houses were in caves and stuff like that. We have to remember structures that we have now, they didn't have then. They had more natural structures. And so they were carving and chiseling and carving and writing it inside of caves, right? And then it became a thing of, we want something that if we have to leave, because this was a nomadic people in this time period. This was a nomadic people, right? So people then needed to put it on something that they could take with them if they had to leave. And I think you all will probably have have read in the word, or you've either heard somebody tell the story of Moses with the 10 Commandments on the tablet, right? On the tablets, right? There was a time period where people recorded the word on tablets and on stones, right? But the thing about the stones is that, especially when you're a nomadic people and you're moving from place to place, the weather could, you might live in one particular area because of the weather. And when the weather changes, you might move again, or so on and so forth. Or if some type of natural disaster happens, you have to move or whatever. So with the people being nomadic at that time, it's like, well, we're recording the word on tablets, on stones, and we do want the word to continue on, and we want to be able to pass it down. But guess what? It's hard to transport these stones, right? These tablets, right? And so that being said, they came up with this idea of recording the word on these big plants called papyrus. And I have to do some research on how to actually pronounce that word, because I'm trying to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. All of this, what I'm telling you, is from when I was in seminary over at Beulah Heights Bible College. I took some classes there a few years ago. I have like several books, and so everything that I'm saying is coming from things that I learned when I was at Beulah Heights Bible College, some of the studies that I did over there. And I actually took a biblical history class as well when I was over there, and that was actually my favorite subject. And then after that, systematic theology was my next favorite subject. But all of this is coming from references and books from that time period. And what I'll try to do is get those books together and link those sources down in the comment section or in the description, right? But what I was saying was, they started recording the word on what we would call papyrus. But basically, they were big leaves. They were big leaves. But the thing about the papyrus is that was something that was not very strong. That was something that could rip easy, could tear easy. So yes, they would be able to get a stick and carve into the leaves, the inside, the other side of the leaves or whatever. But that was something that was hard for them to store it as well, because if it was too cool or if it was too hot, that type of thing would wither away. Because papyrus is really just a big leaf, right? So the different, how our leaves are, they become hardened and they crack up and they break in different seasons. So that also became a problem. And then we get to the point where they're still trying to preserve the word, but this is still very much a nomadic culture, right? And so animal skin becomes a thing. And so they are, once that, animal skin was once used for multiple different purposes, to keep warm, all that, and we're still using animal skin to this day to keep warm and stuff. But back then it was also used to script those animals, keep that. But that would be something that if you would dry the skin out and carve words in it, you could then roll that up and put it on the back of a horse, put it on the back of a donkey, put it on the back of a mule or whatever, and you could travel from place to place with that animal skin rolled up. So it became really easy because it wasn't gonna dry out and wither away like a leaf would. You could take it with you if you had to move. So animal skin was something that was more portable. So I wanted to give us that quick background before I gave us a little more background. I wanted to start with that because what we're talking about is the perseverance of the word, and the way our ancestors worked really hard to make sure that the word persevered into the next generation. So now what I want to talk about is the King James Version. And the reason why I want to talk about the King James Version of the Bible is simply because it is the most known and the most sold copy of it. And I just thought about something else that I didn't really spend a lot of time on restudying, because a lot of this stuff I know it off memory, but some of it I was pulling up and I was restudying some stuff, and I just thought about a particular portion that I didn't really restudy or write down. So, but anyway, the King James Version. I wanted to talk about the King James Version for a quick, brief moment, because the King James Version has really kind of shaped the way we do things, or things that were going on in that era, I should say, kind of shape some of our doctrine. And that particular version of the Bible is very, very revered, right? And what I want to do is I want to expound upon why, and give you some background information on why that particular version of the Bible became so revered, so popular. Why is it so ingrained in us, and everything like that. So a lot of people have this misconception that the King James Version is the first English Bible, and it's not. It's not the first English Bible, right? So actually, the first there were already 3 or 4 English Bibles in rotation prior to the King James Version of the Bible. But what happened is King James, when he got into his position of power, there were different versions of the Bible, including the Great Bible, the Bishop's Bible, and the Geneva Bible. Those Bibles were in rotation and going around in the public. And he ended up ultimately wanting to publish an official Bible for the people at that time. And years and years later, it's still a very, very popular version of the Bible. Just to say that. Before I go into that, there's another part that I meant to touch before I get to that. I want to talk about the difference between translation and transition. I meant to talk about this before I go into talking about the different versions of the Bible. One of the things that I learned when I was over at Beulah Heights Bible College, and one of the things that stuck with me the most, was when my professor explained to me the difference between translation and transmission. And so when I learned the definition of transmission and translation and the difference, it led me to believe that the Bible has kind of technically never really actually been translated. Although we say this is the King James translation, this is the Christian Standard Version, this is the Amplified or Message version. Now, what do I mean by that? So translation means that you translate something verbatim. So let's say if I had someone here that spoke Spanish and I don't speak Spanish, so we get us an interpreter or we get us a translator, and everything I say, that interpreter or the translator tells the person that speaks Spanish exactly what I say. But the thing is, a person never really is able to translate. You can make somebody understand in a certain context what you mean, but because we don't have a character or a word for every single character or word that is in that other language, you're not actually translating it, you're transmitting it. And so what do I mean by that? You're putting it into a context in which they could understand it enough to know what you're saying. So with that being said, this part right here, I've heard a lot of people, now this part right here is not totally factual, but this is very believable that it is possible. Well, I do believe that all of the people that we hear about in the Bible were Africans, were of African descent, and because they were in a particular region on a particular continent and everything like that. But I was also told, and I've also read in different books and stuff about the different strolls and stuff that were found in Africa in or around the time that the Atlantic slave trade began to happen. And some people believe that when the Atlantic slave trade began to happen, they believe that people were stolen and taken to a particular place, and some of these manuscripts may have been stolen and taken to Europe. And so the somehow at some point, whether it has anything to do with the Atlantic slave trade or not, because there's other Bibles that had came out before the Atlantic slave trade. That's my only thing about that. So if that did happen, I don't think it necessarily had anything to do with that particular time period. Not saying that the manuscripts didn't go missing or didn't get stolen from Africa or whatever and then get transported to Europe, but I'm just saying that slavery, but then again, what's really true and what do we really know? Because they say that slavery started in I think like 1616 or something like that. And so we don't know the exact dates on certain stuff, because even in history books, some things have been like recanted over the years. I'm sorry. But anyway, I'm getting off track. What I'm saying is the manuscripts that were found were in a certain cultural environment and were written by a certain culture. And what ended up happening is when those manuscripts got to Europe, they were not translated, they were transmitted. So they were put into a particular cultural context. So, that like I'm saying, my belief is that all it was originally written by the people that was on that continent of Africa, right? In that continent of Africa. And at some point, the manuscripts ended up in Europe, because that's how we then had all these different versions that were published by Europeans, but it was put into a certain cultural context. So, but the word is there for us all, right? With that being said, back to the King James Version. The King James Version was published in 1611, right? And a lot of people think that is the first English version of the Bible. It's not. There is a few things that it is the first of, but it's not the first English version of the Bible. Prior to the King James Version, we had the Great Bible, we had the Bishop's Bible, and we had the Geneva Bible. The Great Bible was the first authorized edition of the Bible in English, and it was published in 1539, right? The Bishop's Bible was an English edition of the Bible, and it was produced under the authority of the Church of England in 1568. And then it was revised in 1572. And later on, the revised version that was published in 1602, that edition was used as a base text for the King James Version that ended up being completed and published in 1611. The Geneva Bible is one of the most historical significant translations of the Bible into English, and it preceded the King James Version by 51 years, and it's one of the primary English Bibles that was used in the 16th century. So anyway, with that being said, what I will say as far as why it's so revered today, some of the facts about the King James Version is that it is the first version that where it was you could purchase it as a regular civilian. So what do I mean by that? Prior to the King James Version, only bishops, priests, those people were the only ones that were able to actually have a Bible in their possession. That's the first thing. They were the only ones to actually have a Bible in their possession and, not be, reprimanded by the authorities or whatever, right? Also, it's also believed that the King James Version is the first version that where you had it canonized. So a canon is a set of texts within one book. So the Bible is considered a biblical canon. So it is a book that has several books inside of it. And the King James Version is one of the most popular canonized versions of the Bible. Prior to the King James Version, it was rare for you to be able to find the Bible in a canon form, right? Where it had several books in one. So people prior to the King James Version were not able to possess the Bible personally. But when King James took over and was ruler, he made it where you could own your own canon or whatever. So you didn't just have to listen to the priest or whatever. Now I'm gonna say this as well. I think that because of some of the traditions and some of the things that our ancestors had to go through and had to go some of the ways that they had to live, we still live in some of those ways, even though we're not forced to now. So for instance, there was a time where, like I said, only the priest was able to have a copy of the Bible. So only the priest was able to read it and interpret it to the people. So the people believed everything that the priest said, right? And so with that being said, but after that, and years and generations later, we still are in a society where we don't necessarily read the word for ourselves as a whole. Not talking about you or me, but just as a whole. Not a lot of people actually read the word for themselves, right? And so with that being said, I think that dates back to a time period where they were not allowed to. And then those who are African Americans, that our ancestors came from slavery, and we were not even allowed to read and write and stuff like that at that time. So I think that a lot of the circumstances that preceded us, is the reason why we are the way we are now. But we don't have to be that way because we have so much material that we can study. We have so much material that is at our fingertips, like literally at our fingertips now, because I'm talking about we had a phone in our hand all day, every day. But what I wanted to say, because I'm just about done now, what I wanted to say was sometimes we get so into tradition and we don't even know why. And I remember a particular professor of mine, I believe it was Professor I can't remember this man's name, but I got his face in my head right now. But this professor talked to us about tradition one day, and he was expounding upon, he was giving us an example, and he said, you know, there was once a church that had members in the church, but there were a lot of people that, you know, had been going to that church for a long time, and they would always wear hats. You're supposed to wear a hat in the sanctuary. They always wore hats in the sanctuary, men and women alike. Everybody wore hats in the sanctuary. And when they would get new members, they would tell them to wear hats in the sanctuary. And so one day, one of the new members finally asked, like, one of the older people, like, why do you all wear hats in the sanctuary? And he said, well, when we first got the building, we were not finished putting a roof on it. So we would wear hats because sometimes we would be in worship and it would start raining in the building. So that's why we always wore hats in the building. So I say all this to say some traditions are useful, but some traditions are, you know, outdated to a certain extent. And we're just doing it because somebody before us did it, but it's not necessarily something that this generation particularly that we need. So with that being said, as it relates to reading the word and studying it for ourselves, I think that we got in the habit of not doing that simply because, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we were not able to even have Bibles in our possession. So we had to go off of the word of the priests, of the bishops, right, of the ministers. And then those of us who have ancestors that come from slavery, those people were not able to read and write. They were not allowed to. They could even be punished by death if they were found out that, you know, about reading and writing, right? So with that being said, I think that it's like instilled and ingrained in a lot of us not to read the word for ourselves. So I want to encourage you all to do that today. You know, the word tells us to study to show thyself approved. So I'm going to stop right there. I may end up doing a deeper dive into Bible history, into biblical history at some later point. I'm going to try to find the other sermon from last year and upload it on my channel as well. I know it's on YouTube somewhere. I'm going to try to put the link in the comments for that other sermon because I actually went into it and I gave a few more Bible verses as well in that. This was just a Bible history lesson, and I just wanted to take, you know, 25 to 30 minutes to just get us there because, like I said, upon request, somebody said, hey, I want to learn about the Bible before we actually start studying it. And so we're on this journey together. Like I said, I've been in ministry for a while. I've been doing it since a child. I was a licensed minister for 6 or 7 years, and then now I'm an ordained elder as well. So I'm not just anybody just coming up here trying to teach, but I told myself and God that whatever it is that he leads me to do in ministry, I'm not going to say no, and I'm not going to hesitate. So he's leading me to do this group, you know, this Bible study group. I don't know where it's going to take us, but I know that I'm going to say yes. If he says to go, I'm going to say yes. So with that being said, I'm going to pray and end the video. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here today over this virtual way of being able to fellowship together. I pray that everything that I said was only what you wanted me to say to your people today, and that they had their hearts and minds open, ready to hear, listen, and obey. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.